So many people in IoT are in this mindset that they have to build their own network, they have to build their own product, they have to build their own solution. We think there's a better way. And when companies decide that instead of building or even buying an IoT solution, they just want to utilize an existing solution that's robust and scalable, OptConnect is there with our cellular-based router solutions that they can plug in just like I use my internet home and literally walk away. We handle everything else so the customer doesn't have to worry about anything.
Welcome back to the Industrial IoT Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Eric Walenza, CEO of AGP, your analyst for tracking and understanding enterprise technology trends. Our guest today is Chris Baird, CEO of OptConnect. OptConnect is a full-service distributor of all major IoT hardware manufacturers, with established ties to domestic and global carriers, plus their own eSIM solution and device management platform. In this talk, we explored the growth drivers for enterprise IoT, trends in complementary technology development, such as 5G and edge AI, and the elements of the total cost of ownership for an IoT connected solution. In particular, we discussed high-growth IoT segments and the market, regulatory, and environmental factors that are driving adoption. We then touched on the underwhelming impact of 5G on the IoT development and the greater promise for 6G as a step change in the cost structure and capability of IoT connectivity. Finally, we discussed the impact of edge AI and on-device analytics to enable new business models and usage scenarios. If you find these conversations valuable, please leave us a comment and a 5-star review. And if you'd like to share your company's story or recommend a speaker, you can email us at team@asiagrowthpartners.com. Finally, if you'd like to discuss technology, innovation, and growth challenges in Asia, please email me directly at erik.walenza@asiagrowthpartners.com. Thank you.
Welcome to the Industrial IoT Spotlight, your number one spot for insight from industrial IoT thought leaders who are transforming businesses today. With your host, Eric Walenza.
Chris, thanks for joining me on the podcast today.
Eric, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to this one. So we're going to be getting into some of the trends around IoT, and we just did a rebranding. So we used to call ourselves IoT One, and then we rebranded as Asia Growth Partners just to emphasize our geographic focus. But I'm very glad to see that the term IoT is still going strong, since we made kind of a strategic bet on that when we set up the company about 8-9 years ago. It really actually seems to be accelerating as the technology matures. Is that what you're seeing as well? Is kind of just high level growth rates stay fairly strong in IoT adoption?
Yeah, I think it's easy, Eric, for you and I to sit here and think about the future and think about the fact that there will be, I don't have a crystal ball, but I don't think I need one on this one. I think we can call it. I think there's going to be more connected devices in the future. More connected everything, how we interact with each other, how we interact with our products around the home that we utilize, our workspace, how businesses utilize connectivity. Boy, I think it's easy for us to sit here and predict. If there was an over-under, I think we know which way we would go.
Yeah. We just did a survey of some of our customers on what technologies they're most focused on. And of course, AI came number one, but close behind it was IoT. And I was a bit surprised. But then as I started to talk to some people, that I think the thing that connects those two particular technologies is they're both incredibly general purpose, right? Where there's a lot of technologies like AR, VR, for example, that have very specific purposes, and they might be very meaningful in those areas. But IoT, right, you start with kind of maybe, whatever missile M2M connections 40 years ago. But then as the technology matures, it's going to be eventually, and it already is in every industry, moving into pretty much every product category. So just a very general purpose technology. But before we get into the more general industry trends, Chris, would love to learn more about your company, OptConnect. So I think you joined the company and now you are president and CEO, but you've been with them for about 13 years. Were they already kind of a mature company when you had joined?
Boy, no, we bootstrap this all the way from the ground up. Yeah. So I've been basically in the space since essentially the beginning. Before the company my focus has always been kind of this entrepreneurial spirit of diving in and making something happen. I saw the potential for IoT clear from the beginning. I think we were calling it telemetry. I guess back to your earlier point about making a bet on what it would be called today. So from telemetry to M2M to IoT, who knows what we'll call it in 10 years from now, but the foundational concepts have not changed. There is an incredible need for devices to be able to communicate with systems or with other devices. We have the internet for people. That's what we use all day long to communicate with the rest of the world. Well, the Internet of Devices, or the Internet of Things, as we call it, is becoming a mission critical part of everyday interaction that we have. We utilize it in the world around us every single day and hardly recognize that. I know, or I will know that IoT has arrived when I can sit in a barber's chair and they always make small talk. I don't go to the same stylist or to the same salon, but I'll know that I've arrived when I sit down and they ask, well, what do you do for work? And I can just say, oh, I'm in IoT. And they go, oh, okay. But so far that's never happened. I have to describe who I am, what I do, why it matters. And then eventually they either change the conversation or their head starts to nod. Every now and then one or two of them will go, whoa, yeah, that's everywhere. I used that at a Redbox today where I paid my parking ticket for when I was parking for 2 hours and I paid at a parking meter and I used IoT. It's in the world around us. It's everywhere. So a little bit about me and in my role, and really what drew me into the IoT space was, like all great stories, it was almost by accident. I didn't have a vision. Like I said, when I joined up, it was very, very early stage, and connectivity was not actually our focus. We were in the business of connecting or actually operating ATM machine. And when I say ATM machine, it's exactly the type that you're thinking. It's the kind that you see in a convenience store. It's what you would see at a hotel lobby or in an airport. But a clear distinction, it's not the kind you would see at your bank that you would walk up to or drive up to in a counter. They're two different fundamental styles of ATMs. And the kind that we were connecting and owning and operating actually were the kind that are, they take up 2 square feet in a store and they're typically right by the front door. You see them at a bodega or a C store, like I said, and you stand up and you put your card in and you ask for $20 and you get your money out. That industry had a challenge, and it was all around connectivity. That industry needed to be able to be a little bit more nimble. In fact, there was a growing need to take cash and bring it to temporary events. Think of a lot of these festivals or larger carnivals, events, concerts. And a lot of those were cash-based. And so our customers were approaching us saying, hey, how do I connect this to the internet? How do I go about making sure that when I do my transaction, the customer gets their cash and it's a seamless experience? And that's how OptConnect started. We were out to solve that particular problem.
Okay.
As we started, we realized there are a lot of things just like the ATM, these unattended machines, they serve a critical purpose and they need to connect to the internet. And maybe there's not a traditional method to connect those. And it grew from there, Eric. We started to see opportunities around digital signage, around vending, around all types of kiosks. And when you think about the world that way, and you kind of zoom out and you think about a machine that needs to connect to the internet, it's not attended, it serves some critical function. That world actually is pretty big and growing. And that's really where it all started.
Oh, super interesting. Okay. Which also means that when you started, you were more on the service side of the business and then developing into the technology side because you saw the need for technical solutions that can provide that seamless connectivity. But you were really coming from a service kind of a management perspective. What does that look like today? Because as you said, now there's a lot more businesses Are you still very service oriented, meaning that you have key accounts and you're kind of hands on in terms of helping them to manage, to maybe plan and manage their deployments and their assets? Or are you more on the technology side where you're providing the platform, the connectivity network, et cetera, and then it's kind of from the customer's perspective, a subscription and maybe plug and play model?
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. To go back to the ATM story, obviously, we don't own and operate ATMs. We are well beyond that. It only took about a year to recognize that, man, if we wanted to get serious about that space, we really needed to build up a true company. And OptConnect itself was born. And first of all, we like to say that we know exactly what our customers are experiencing because we used to be operators. We came from that side of the world. And we set out to make a perfected solution that took every decision out. And when I say every decision out, let me finish that thought. Every complicating factor that goes into operating and scaling an IoT deployment, we took that complexity out. And as a result, we're now the latter of what you were describing. We've turned this into essentially a turnkey solution that allows our customers to just plug it in and walk away. And I'll give you an example of what I mean, and maybe for our listeners who are hearing this for the first time. I don't know, and I'm in the space, and you probably are in the same boat. I don't know all of the switches, all of the fiber, everything that's involved in delivering the internet to my home that I use every single day. I just know that it arrives at my front door and is broadcast out of my Wi-Fi routers. Obviously, I know a little bit more about that, but my point is, and to illustrate that, is I don't get involved. When something goes wrong upstream, somebody cuts fiber, a switch goes down, something happens, and my service is interrupted, I call a phone number and they quickly get it resolved. Typically, they're either already aware of it because they have tools or systems in place, or other customers have already reported it. But my point is, I don't pick out a shovel out of my shed and go walk up the road and start digging to try to find where that line got spliced. But to follow this example a little further, so many people in IoT are in this mindset that they have to build their own network. They have to build their own product. They have to build their own solution. We think there's a better way. And when companies decide that instead of building or even buying an IoT solution, they just want to utilize an existing solution that's robust and scalable, OptConnect is there with our cellular-based router solutions that they can plug in, just like I use my internet home, and literally walk away. We handle everything else so the customer doesn't have to worry about anything. So today we would tell you, yeah, there are key accounts. There are great customers. We scale up to our largest customers have tens of thousands of deployments, and our smallest customers, they have a single location. It's a mom and pop convenience store that connects a single ATM. Our largest customers, maybe they operate tens of thousands of locations all throughout the country, but the need is the same for either one of those two solutions or those two examples. They need quick, reliable, easy to use internet that they don't have to manage and get involved in. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that helps. And then if I'm looking at the products, I would consider these mostly to be kind of medium-sized equipment, right? So we're not talking about, like putting devices into 1 million sensors that are being kind of deployed around the world. What we're talking about is digital signage, vending machines, kiosks, entertainment, point of sale systems, and then some like industrial irrigation and so forth. But it looks like that's kind of the system level that you're working on. Is that about right?
Yeah, that's right. And our background is in retail. And so I'm giving a couple of examples there, but we've actually expanded pretty significantly beyond that now into a number of other industries, whether it's medical or security or facility monitoring, even environmental monitoring. Think of water management, irrigation systems, wastewater. There's a number. So coming from one particular space inside retail, or even automated retail, if you will, now OptConnect has expanded into essentially anytime we can go anywhere. We're in about 50 different verticals today, and that's expanding. But you're right, there is a sweet spot for what we do. We know that, and we're able to scale up and down just outside of the strike zone there and be able to hit those. So we connect millions of end devices across a little over almost 1.2 million locations that we have under management today. And that's growing pretty quickly. And it's in dozens of industries.
And I know one of the key criteria, maybe the primary criteria for your customers is total cost of ownership, right? There's hardware involved here, there's software, there's connectivity payments to the telcos. So there's a lot of different components. And one of the things that you're doing as a business is you're simplifying that so they can buy one service. If you think about total cost of ownership, what are the major cost buckets there? And how do you as a business work to reduce that for customers? Because I think that from the customer perspective is going to be in this area. So I guess there's convenience and there's some other things that are also quite important. But when making the business case, this is going to be the primary one.
Yeah, and I see it all the time. I talk to our customers and they tell me that connectivity at scale in particular is just extremely challenging. It's significantly more complicated than many people realize and often includes, these hidden costs that you alluded to. Our solution radically simplifies the cost structure, the operating structure, the ownership structure. We help everything. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Let me focus first on some of the pain points customers experience when they're deploying large IoT deployments at scale. There's no question that anybody in this 2024 economy has seen rising labor costs. The cost of people is definitely going up. Our customers, often as a result, they lack the technical resources in-house. Maybe they can't keep up. Maybe they never invested in it. Maybe somebody moved on to a new position. We see that all the time. Companies had a competency, then somebody took another job and that competency walked out the door. So lack of technical resources is an area that we help supplement. And I'll talk a little bit about what that looks like in a minute, but let me touch on a couple other pain points that our customers have. One or the other is essentially, and I don't know about you, but probably for the majority of the listeners, and certainly in my case, I basically have unlimited internet at home. If I need to stream 3 TVs at the same time, and I'm on a Zoom call or in a meeting, or my kids are doing work or whatever, in our world, basically unlimited internet is really important. That's not the case in IoT. Every bit, every byte that goes across the network is expensive, and it costs money. And so often we'll see something that goes wrong, and when it goes wrong, it typically goes wrong fast. But think about trying to update firmware on 10,000 locations. Well, that's a lot of extra data that it takes to push that operating system over the air so that the end application, call it a kiosk, has the latest firmware, or even in digital signage, the latest advertisement, the latest video. And often that relates or results in higher than expected costs. And, in a lot of cases, our customers will report to us that outside of OptConnect, they didn't know that was coming. They didn't know how to handle that. They just got a surprise bill. We're helping our customers manage that, although it's becoming continually, increasingly important to manage that data. We're seeing more and more data traverse the network. That's another example where we can step in and help customers manage that process. If you don't know, you don't know. And oftentimes, you may not know for 45 days past the issue when you get the bill or the invoice from the carrier in the mail, and all of a sudden you owe, an extra $50,000 in overage that you weren't aware of. This is pretty significant, and we spend a lot of time on this, but these are just pain points that we hear customers talk about, is something like outage. I think everybody remembers not too long ago. In fact, there's been a couple. Verizon had a pretty significant outage that affected handheld devices, and everybody's phone switched to an SOS mode. We saw AT&T a couple of weeks prior to that. They had a pretty large outage. We have a plan for that, and I'll touch on that just a little bit. There are a number of other pain points our customers have, and I'll just touch on a couple of them without giving examples. Designing the solution, how to do that, is costly. Cybersecurity, handling the logistics of the supply chain. Specifically, supply chain can be incredibly painful if you don't really know how to plan for or manage that. Unexpected truck rolls, technical support calls. Who's going to handle all of that, and where do those go, and what do they do when they get those calls? So there's a ton of pain points around here, and I'm hardly doing it justice. But we think that there are a number of issues where they all result in the same thing: additional cost, additional labor, reduced revenue, and additional downtime. Our solution we've built to solve as many of those problems in a white glove manner as possible. And as a result, we can quantify for our customers using OptConnect how they're resulting in a lower total cost of connectivity. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We have a solution that we call Connect IQ. It's basically a platform of platforms. It bundles together our software, all of our services, and the result is we're able to do things with our device that result in higher uptime or less truck rolls for our customers.
If you're still listening, then you must take technology seriously. So I'd like to introduce you to our case study database. Think of it as a roadmap that can help you understand which use cases and technologies are being deployed in the world today. We have cataloged more than 9,000 case studies and are adding 500 per month with detailed tagging by industry and function. Our goal is to help you make better investment decisions that are backed by data. Check it out at the link below, and please share your thoughts. We'd love to hear how we can improve it. Thank you, and back to the show.
For example, if a device goes down out in the field, our solution automatically detects that. It runs a script, or basically you could call it an autonomous agent at the edge, and it takes a number of actions so that on the local side of that device or out at the edge, it has the opportunity to tunnel back home, reestablish its connectivity completely autonomously without having to roll a truck. The alternative to that is the customer doesn't know, their customer calls and tells them their device is down. They have to roll a truck. Maybe it takes 2, 4, 24 hours. Who knows how long it takes? They've lost revenue. They've created ill will with their customer. They had to roll a truck, and all to find out that they needed to reboot a device just so it could reestablish connection. Our autonomous agents at the edge will do all of that within a few minutes of detecting a problem, and the customer never has to do a thing. If in the event none of that works how it's supposed to, we definitely have kind of a safety net in this customer support space where we will watch for, detect, and try to actually resolve those from our end. Even without a prompt from the customer, we'll proactively go out and watch and see what we can do to eliminate that issue. Or in the case of talking to a customer on the phone, we will actually even go up into proactively warranting a device. We'll send out an extra device to the customer. They're up and operating 24 hours later, and they're done. They don't have to carry all that extra inventory. They don't have to commit to minimum purchases of equipment. They don't have to have carriers. We'll take care of all of that. So we maximize the customer's uptime for their equipment. That's another value-added solution. We do that through a series of software, through this bundled hardware, multi-carrier application that's just kind of this white glove solution the customer doesn't have to ever touch.
Great, thanks. Well, that really helps explain the business, and I think also explain to an extent why IoT is continuing to scale as it is, right? Because certainly there is some exciting technology advancements in terms of being able to run AI compute on the edge and so forth. But really, I think a lot of the scale is driven by companies that are, let's say, not so much adding capability to the core technology, but reducing the cost, reducing the complexity, and making it a viable solution for a lot more applications. So let's turn to the application side then. So you mentioned you're operating in 50 and growing verticals. Where do you see big upticks in growth recently? What are the big growth drivers in IoT verticals that are either happening maybe in the past couple of years, or that you kind of see starting to hit that hockey stick curve and expect to be really driving growth in the coming years?
I love this question too, because there's a couple of obvious and there's some not so obvious impacts here that help give some favorable trade winds, if you will. First is regulation. Regulation has the ability to influence markets for the good or markets for the bad. I'll give you maybe a bad example of how less than ideal regulation has resulted in a really great IoT opportunity, but maybe a catastrophic, social experiment. California crime is way up. There's no doubt. Everybody knows that it's up. It's become a safe haven. There's a certain dollar amount threshold that you can get away with, and it's not criminal activity. And as a result, all of the entire retail markets have had to shift in order to lock down their products and become, more, they're managing shrinkage, they're managing violence. And at the same time, many large corporations have adopted a non-confrontation policy. So if there's a dispute with a customer or they're getting ready to walk with some product out the door, employees are instructed, don't intervene, don't interfere, just call the authorities. The authorities are now saying, this isn't worth our time. We're not going to investigate. So crime is up. Therefore, to combat that, IoT can step in and bring innovative solutions to market. The advent of mobile security trailers as a deterrent is big. The ability, I'll give you another example, the ability to stop a shopping cart at the front door before it has the ability to exit by locking up the wheels when an algorithm detects that shopping cart hasn't actually been gone through the checkout, maybe even the goods haven't been purchased. Those are a couple other examples. Those are awesome situations. And then just security cameras, personal wearable security cameras, systems and installations, for security monitoring. All of these are examples of where some decision upstream resulted in an environmental situation. Now you've got crime that's basically tolerable. And whether we could dispute whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but IoT can step in, and each of those are significant applications where you can actually make a meaningful difference. You can deter it, you can prevent it, you can eliminate it if you can track it. So that's an area that we're excited about. The other thing that can influence this is, I say this kind of delicately, but in the Western United States for the last 30 years, there was basically this prolonged drought. And it was becoming increasingly easy to see that this scarce resource, water, which happens to be free and falls from the sky, but when it doesn't fall, it becomes pretty meaningful, and it's certainly not free. You can see how that's starting to impact. So we thought, okay, well, this is a great opportunity to help manage and monitor something that clearly is going to become a problem. Fortunately, the last 2 years have been pretty favorable, but the trend continues. Being able to monitor and manage water as a resource is another growing opportunity for the business. We're seeing all sorts of industries that for the very first time, they're making a step towards adopting connectivity as a solution. We talked about a number of these, but medical devices, wearable medical devices that get sent home with a patient, there's business there. We've seen a lot of excitement in the retail space around a concept that we call a smart safe. It's basically the equivalent of a retail location either having to deposit cash from their till at a bank every night or whatever it might be. It's taking that deposit box at the bank and bringing it to the retailer and putting it in a back office or underneath a counter so that the clerk or the customer, or the employee never has to take that cash and actually go to the banking facility. So there's a number of drivers there that help the markets kind of adopt. But the reality is, the biggest of all of these, the macro trend, is that cellular is viable, it's ubiquitous, and it's cost effective as an alternative source of connectivity. And that's empowering dozens and dozens of applications in hundreds of industries to explore the adoption of connectivity. So, yeah, that's where we're at, Eric, and we see lots of areas, and there's dozens that we haven't even been able to get to yet. But if we do, our end market product is highly adaptable to various industries.
Thanks, Chris. Maybe we could touch quickly on that topic of cost structure, because some of those use cases that you mentioned are clearly very important, right? Talking about measuring rainfall, for example, or moisture on a more granular level. I mean, that can be very important for monitoring wildfire risk or for monitoring, kind of optimizing use in agriculture. But then, of course, there's the cost attached to that, right? And so, it's really a question of economic viability. What do you see in terms of cost of connectivity trends for IoT devices connected to cellular? Is there kind of a consistent year-over-year decline? Is it more that as kind of new architectures come online, that there can be step changes in terms of the cost structure? How does that look like?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's one to think about when you think about upfront costs. You think about operating costs. You think about hidden costs. Certainly, there is a trend towards a more cost-effective piece of hardware, and we see that as well. Then there's the second piece, which is maybe more of the operating cost that gets a little less visibility, but is important. First of all, you have these ongoing cellular costs, and those fluctuate based on usage. They fluctuate based on geographic location. They fluctuate based on carriers. OptConnect's flexible data plans, it can help stabilize those costs. We can keep that in check. And we see, we try to always be medium. You don't ever want to see a massive overage. You don't want to see something where the bottom just falls out altogether. But we try to help maintain that so our customers have a predictable cost structure. And there certainly are economies of scale that customers can tap into. Volume over time, volume in aggregate, and essentially committing to growth. That helps us. We have commitments on our side too, so it helps us be able to forecast and plan around those. So when you think about the operating costs, there's certainly a variable fluctuating cost that we help bring down and stabilize for customers. And then, on the other side of that, there's this question about value. While the cost structure comes down, how can you add additional value? And it's something that we obsess over. Actually, are there things that we can do? Is there information we can provide? Is there data we can tap into and help paint a picture? Can we give our customer a better idea what's happening environmentally at their machine? Remember, these are unattended machines. So there's nobody there keeping an eye on maintenance. If you're there every day and something happens, you can easily repair that or take care of it. But when nobody's there, what are the indicators that are there to tell you a problem is about to occur or a problem just occurred? And we think that we have an opportunity to give our customers additional insights that help them become more aware of what's happening at their location and be able to manage that appropriately. So, OptConnect, again, I'll just come back to, there's some hidden costs as well that I'll talk through. For example, cybersecurity. IoT and security go hand in hand. You can't spell IoT without security. And devices, they require additional resources. So our security first approach gives us robust protection. We're watching for emerging threats. We're reducing potential issues, breaches, any costs associated with that. And that's an added service that just is included. In fact, doesn't get a lot of fanfare. Maybe you don't even want to shine the spotlight on it intentionally. But having a secure, reliable solution is certainly something that can become a hidden cost and become, part of the forefront very quickly in the event of a major issue. So you asked the question, tell me about the total cost of ownership. Well, through the life cycle of the device, there's one last element that's super important that can drive up, and it's a hidden cost, and that's the end of life of a device. The device replacement or the disposal of a device at the end of its cycle has to be considered when you think about the cost of a deployment. A lot of people will think or tell you that just acquiring a piece of hardware upfront one time is important. But if that device has an issue, midway through your financial model, you got to model in another additional device. Well, with OptConnect, we cover that. It's completely under warranty. As long as our customers are under contract and paying that monthly fee, we can transition them to new technology. We can migrate. We can upgrade legacy equipment. The systems, the customer never has to worry about something going bad or having to retrain their workforce around all of it. OptConnect, we replaced hundreds of thousands of 3G devices for our customers and our competitors' devices. When the networks sunsetted that equipment, customers came flocking to OptConnect because they knew that they would get a reliable solution, that they would never have to incur another CapEx purchase for a piece of hardware ever again. So it's that approach that helps our customers see a quicker return on their investment.
Great. Thanks, Chris. Let me touch quickly on two recent technologies that came to market. And I'm curious to hear how they're impacting your customers. So the first is 5G. And 5G, of course, is being used for higher bandwidth use cases, but it's also had a value premise around IoT. And what I've heard, and I'm curious on your perspective, is that has been somewhat underwhelming, right? The actual impact of 5G or the utilization for IoT, and 6G might be much more of a game changer. It feels like 6G, although it's still very much in the design phase, is likely to be really designed to enable IoT at a kind of a different scale than is currently deployed. But across your networks, are there scenarios where 5G is helpful, or are you typically connected to like a 4G network and that is fine?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, maybe just for clarity for the audience or the viewers, 5G is an iteration of LTE. 4G is part of LTE. So the underpinning platform is still LTE. Obviously, the long-term evolution. And so 4G was planned, 5G is planned, and it could go on forever, but the technology underneath really isn't going to change. It's moving to LTE allowed for network changes to enable new technology, whereas old legacy networks required complete rip and replace of the network in order to change. So 5G is and continues to be expected to be revolutionary. Faster speeds, lower latency, connect millions of devices seamlessly. Those are all important. However, the rollout hasn't been as transformative as anticipated, mostly because it's incredibly expensive to build a dense network. One of the things, coverage in particular in maybe remote areas, it's a lot more difficult to get those bandwidth or to, for that signal to propagate from the tower and get adequate coverage. And you get into a urban environment where there's organic things like trees and leaves and rain and cloud and dust, and that can interfere with those signals, especially the ultra high speed, ultra high frequency connections. And so consequently, businesses aren't universally upgrading to 5G because of the cost and because of the experience, but it will get better. The carriers continue to invest in this very, very heavily. There's pockets where it's very good. Think of the NFL cities, if you will. Those are some of the big cities that were able to get that speed very, very quickly. But yeah, you mentioned how 6G could become a game changer. And even though it's still early and it's in its theoretical stages, it is expected to be a significant leap forward. Even more low latency, even higher speeds. There's rumor it could be up to 100 times faster than 5G, which when you start thinking about latency and speeds as low as a microsecond, we don't even know how to manage that. I don't remember. You think about blinking your eye and how we do that so quickly, 100 times faster than that. Pretty crazy. There's other benefits that we like to think about. Enhanced density. You've got more capability at the edge, unlike previous generations. Maybe AI edge computing directly into the network, more autonomous IoT devices. All of these are in the realm of possibility. Certainly, the other area that's kind of painful today is just around energy efficiency, and I think the iterations around 6G could certainly do that. And that's going to lead to new business models, new industries. You combine all of those ultra reliable, low latency, AI, the ability to connect millions of devices. 6G could be pretty transformative. You think about logistics, smart cities, healthcare. They could all happen at an entirely new scale. I did want to highlight one important thing that came with LTE, the Cat-M network, which is a segmented piece of the network that allows for, specifically designed around IoT devices And that has been a bright spot for our industry around connectivity and some of these new networks. So certainly some new exciting things come, even though that's way off in the future. The vision promises pretty dramatic leap in connectivity.
Yeah, great. Thanks for giving that context. The last topic I wanted to touch on was edge AI. So, there's some scenarios in a connected vehicle, for example, where, clearly this is going to be really fundamental to the technology. And then there's a lot of others where it might not be core to the value proposition of the device, but it might be a very kind of significant value add or enable additional capability. Where are you seeing customers today either already adopt this or start to explore deployment of edge AI?
Yeah, you know what? This is pretty neat stuff because, like you said, I like the connected vehicle. It's a perfect example. Not currently extremely applicable to OptConnect today, but very well could be, allowing those connected vehicles to process the data locally. Think about collision detection and lane keeping, pedestrian recognition, emergency braking, all the things that I think companies like Tesla are doing really, really well. Those are really important. I loved my Tesla for the period of time that I had it. I don't currently own one now, but I aspire to get back to there here pretty quickly. But, I had purchased the advanced computer that was allowed for some of the beta testing, and very, very impressive to see what they've been able to do. And it only continues to get better. The other is, think about vehicle to vehicle connectivity and, autonomously being able to drive with a near instantaneous decision based on what another vehicle is doing. Vehicle to vehicle or vehicle to everything, where everything interacts with the vehicle. Think of traffic lights, other infrastructure, power grid, charging, everything improves. You can see how you can influence that for good. Better traffic flow, improved safety, better use of the infrastructure. You think of California giving the mandate, everything needed to move to electric vehicles. Then just a couple months later saying, please don't charge during peak hours because our infrastructure can't hold it, can't handle it. These are diabolically opposing views, and being able to do that more intelligently are areas where edge AI, I think, can become the core of everything in the industry. I think we're still a ways off before there's mass adoption there, but there's plenty there. There's some other ones, Eric, we probably don't have time to get into them, but if you think about healthcare, think about remote surgery and what edge AI can do to enable some of the advanced diagnostics, some of the capabilities to be able to augment and assist providers and doctors. I'm not foreseeing the day when, we go and get a scan by a robot and that becomes our full-time primary care provider. I think there's always going to be a need for the human element there, but man, you could certainly augment some of the hospital capabilities, some of the processing times. There's a whole potential around this. I'll give you just one brief example. I saw a very specific surgeon for my eyes who came out of UC Berkeley, performed a series of procedures. I had 4 different surgeries to get my eyes to where they're at today. I had terrible vision. And I was able, through a number of these surgeries, be able to now have 20/15 vision, and it's awesome. I had to wait months to be able to see this specialist because I had to wait for the right time for them to be in my geography to be able to make an appointment to see them. Think about how telemedicine could help augment that, even telesurgery. Everything I had, all the surgeries I had, literally putting your eyeball under a scalpel while you're awake, by the way, sorry to paint a gruesome picture, it was incredibly important. But the doctor had robotic assistance. That could happen in real time with some of these advent, technology around 6G, et cetera. And they could make split-second adjustments and allow robots to respond to surgeon's command without latency, without issues. I could have probably had my procedure months in advance when, the doctor was 3 states away instead of waiting till they came into my backyard. So just a couple of examples of how I believe, into the future, we'll see more capabilities around edge AI.
Gotcha. Well, Chris, thanks for sharing your perspective on where you are as a business today, but also the industry and where we're going. Anything that we haven't touched on, maybe any new developments that you're planning to launch next year that you'd like to share before we cut off?
Yeah, I think stay tuned. There's some really exciting things happening at OptConnect. We've been able to expand our capabilities through some really awesome acquisitions. Recently completed an acquisition in Latin America, a company by the name of M2M Data Global. Earlier this year, just a couple of weeks ago, we concluded another acquisition in Europe, a company by the name of Capestone. They each have their own unique set of capabilities. But through it all, our commitment is to building, with security, with sustainability, a very simplified solution that helps our true legacy customers take advantage of all the advents of IoT that are coming at them so quickly that they probably can't capitalize on them on their own. So the technology we build, helps not only connect more devices, but it helps connect people. We help foster better quality of life through the use of IoT in a B2B model. And we just think that's awesome. And it's been a lot of fun to see some of how our customers are reshaping the way we interact with our world every day through the use of IoT. So stay tuned. There's definitely more coming from a product perspective. Like I hinted a little bit earlier about helping our customers see what's happening environmentally in their world. And certainly a little bit more on the growth side. And that's probably all I can say about that at the moment. But keep a close eye on OptConnect. We're up to some really fun stuff.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I wish you success in integrating those businesses. That's a lot of geographic expansion, Chris. And thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, appreciate it. Pleasure's all mine. And thank you for having us. And we look forward to speaking again in the future.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of the Industrial IoT Spotlight. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at IoT1HQ and to check out our database of case studies on IoT1.com. If you have unique insight or a project deployment story to share, we'd love to feature you on a future edition. Write us at eric.walenza@iot1.com.